need to have an audit committee to audit their work. So that's why they don't have a position. Okay, so let's see. So a little bit about this meeting. I do have a general question and answer section at the very end of this training. You are welcome to leave this training at any time. We have your email addresses. I do want you to stay, but we do have your email addresses so that at the very end or tomorrow we can email you this presentation that I'm about to share, as well as the detailed training materials. I put together such detailed step-by-step instructions that you can perform an audit or provide that to an auditor who's going to be auditing your unit's books, and you guys can take care of having those step-by-step instructions, and it should be able to guide you all through the way. Okay, so the PTA puts out safety cones twice a year. I'm going to share my screen. It's right here, my presentation. Okay, so first of all, my email is right there. I will provide it at the end also. Plus, you'll be getting an email from either the district PTA or from me, and you can contact me anytime. You have lots of resources for your unit as well. So, for the audit, the PTA puts out safety cones twice a year, and that is to make sure that we stop and we audit our books. So every 6 months, we take the time to stop and make sure that our PTAs are staying on track, or to help them get back on track. And that's what the auditor is doing when they perform an audit. They're finding things that help us come back onto the track we're supposed to be on to help protect our PTAs as well as all of our officers. Okay, so the purpose of an audit is to check the accuracy of all the finances, and it's to verify that all the funds that come into the PTA are spent according to how the association voted to spend them. It's also to review procedures to make sure that we are following all PTA procedures, insurance procedures, and government procedures. And the PTA procedures will give your PTA association confidence in your PTA, knowing that things are being handled in a business-like manner and that everything is being done according to general guidelines, and that will only serve your PTA better to get even better with those procedures, and your association will see that. We also want to get into compliance with our insurance procedures and requirements. So we have a PTA company that provides the protection for our PTAs and our PTA officers, and they have their own requirements and their own procedures, and we need to follow those. Or else we could be held personally liable if you are a PTA officer. So not to scare you, but if your PTA sponsors an event, meaning spends money or gives money for an event that is not an activity that our PTA insurance company allows, and somebody gets injured as a result of PTA negligence, then there's a chance that the executive board, PTA officers could be held personally liable. So nobody goes into PTA wanting to connect their family life and their personal life with any of this. So we are all just volunteering, and we never want to have any of that happen. So it's so important that our insurance company procedures and requirements are being followed in order to be able to protect our PTAs and our officers. We want to continue having our PTAs do all the wonderful work that they're doing. And we also need to comply with government requirements. We have a 501c3 and we don't pay any business taxes. And in order to be able to continue that status, we have to follow the government's guidelines. So that again is more requirements that we have to look at and make sure that we are staying on track with. Okay, so the audit timeline. We do have semi-annual audits. As I said, it's twice a year. They are mentioned in the bylaws for your unit. So all the unit bylaws will say the mid-year and the year-end audits are required. Audits are done at different times. They're done during the semi-annual audits, as well as they are done when bank accounts are closed, such as if you choose to move your PTA account from Bank of America to Chase Bank, or at any time during the PTA year, an audit needs to be done. So that's another reason to put out the safety cones and to stop, just to ensure that everything ended well with the one bank account and is starting up well with the new bank account. Another reason an audit is needed outside of the semi-annual audits is if a check signer is removed. So let's just say your treasurer or the president has to leave the school because their child gets transferred to another school, or they move out of the state, or one of the check signers, let's just say it's one of the VPs is the other check signer on the account, and he or she no longer can fulfill their obligations for their position, then they need to, they don't have to do anything, but your PTA needs to put out those safety cones and make sure to stop at that point too, to make sure that everything, as I said, ends on a good note, everything is recorded and everything matches up, so everything can start out new and well, whether it's a new signer or a new bank account. So those are the exceptions outside of those semi-annual audits. Also, as an auditor, or just the audit in general, should not take longer than 2 weeks to complete. So if you know you're going to go on vacation, please try not to accept the books and records of your unit or the unit you're auditing until you know you're going to have some time to dedicate towards it, because they really, technically, they should stop and not write any checks. They should not do any financial activity. It does happen, but they need their books back to be able to continue doing PTA work. So 2 weeks should be plenty enough time for you to be able to get this done. Some people will get the audits done in a couple hours. Some people, it will take them a couple hours over a couple of days. And it really depends on the books that you're looking at and how complicated they are, and if they are complete and done and done rather well. So that also helps to shorten the time for the auditor. Okay, so who completes the audit? You do have lots of options. If you have an auditor for your unit, that is great. So your bylaws will tell you if you have an auditor position. And I think all of them probably do, but you are not required to fill that position, just like it's very difficult to fill sometimes all the positions on your executive board. There are at least 3 that you are required to in order to have a PTA, but an auditor is not required. But if you have one, that's great. But if you have one that might feel a little uncomfortable performing the audit, because where they may not be objective because they worry about maybe other board members who will take offense to them writing something up that you're going to have to probably write up. And if you feel uncomfortable as the PTA auditor, you could always ask the council, connect with your president, or if the president's the one you're going to have issues with in your PTA, then it needs to be addressed at the council issue, and the council treasurer can help find another PTA where the auditors can just swap. So the PTA auditor for one unit can swap with another school's auditor, and you just audit the other person's books. You're still auditing and performing the audit for your PTA. You're just doing it for another unit, but you're ensuring that your audit is getting done too. So that is an option. Another option is you can pay to have your books audited. You can pay, like in an independent CPA. Hopefully they have nonprofit experience. That's a very reasonable expense for the PTA. Sorry, excuse me. And then sometimes the council treasurer and council auditor or district auditor might be available to do it in extreme cases if you really can't find somebody. Another option that I have found very, very helpful is that you can swap with another unit. I know I talked about the auditor swapping, but if you don't have an auditor, quite frequently treasurers can swap books because the majority of the audit is looking at the treasurer's books. And so it's easier for a treasurer to be able to swap books. So if you, like when I was treasurer over at Darby Elementary, I swapped books with the Nobel Middle School's treasurer, and we audited each other's books. and meaning the records of the PTA, not just our treasurer's books, because you also audit the secretary's books and all the other PTA records. So we swapped and we audited each other. So our audits were done that way, and we didn't have an auditor at the time anyway. So that is another option. Okay, going on to auditor's resources. The best resource you can have is getting to, and let me pull it down right here. Let's get Emily, okay, is to go into capta.org. That's the California State PTA website. And sorry, my screen's not very big, but right over here that I'm sort of covering is the search area. So if I type in auditor, a whole bunch of resources will come on up for auditor duties, the auditor reports, the PTA audit, tons of information in here. I do list on the presentation that I just jumped off of specific areas in the toolkit. The PTA has a toolkit that allows an easier way of getting and moving around and facilitating to get more information, especially for finance.
Karen, can I interrupt you real quick?
Yes.
We're still looking at your Zoom.
Oh no.
Looking at where you went to.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, that is very helpful that does not work. Okay, I have one other area that I'm going to refer to, and you'll have to let me know then if you see it or not. Okay. Thank you so much. I should have tried that out, but I realized I have one Zoom account and I couldn't use my other Zoom. I don't have another Zoom account to figure that out. So thank you for letting me know. Okay. So moving on, okay, so now it's time to get started. So you want to collect all the books from the unit, from the treasurer and secretary and financial secretary. Not all, I would say more units do not have a financial secretary than those that do. But if your unit does, or the unit that you'll be auditing does have one, you need those books as well. I also ask for a list of the executive board members, and I also usually get an email or a telephone number for them. So if I have questions, I have people to ask, and I'm not relying solely on the one treasurer, let's just say. Also, it's a good idea to have their contact information so that you can send them a copy of your findings and recommendations, because those are the people who need to see those findings and recommendations so that they can help to ensure to improve on those procedures at the very end. Okay, so you collected the books, get your supplies. So most of the reports you want to use a pen. You can use a pencil, but eventually you'll have to prepare the audit report in an ink pen. You do need a red ink pen because you will be underlying some areas at the very end of your audit. A calculator of some sort. I usually like notes or little post-it notes or tabs, because sometimes I go through the audit materials and I want to come back to an area and I just put a little post-it note or a tab there. I find that to be helpful. Then you want to download and print the audit report and audit checklist forms. Okay, now I'm going to jump to someplace off of here again, and Barbara, you'll have to let me know if you see anything. Okay, it's not a web browser anymore, so do you see the audit report form?
We're still looking at the screen that says get started.
Okay, well then never mind. Okay. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so that is helpful to know. Thank you. Okay, so you download and you print. There are two forms that you need to complete during the audit. So it's the audit report and the audit checklist. And so you print those out, and that's an area that you can, when you're going to get this, as well as my detailed notes. Again. I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Back to get started again, the slide.
Oh, yes, we're at the get started. Yes.
And that's where you want to be.
Yes. Is that where you are?
Yes, that's where we are.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I wanted to jump to show the, what I was going to show with the audit report form and the audit checklist form is that the PTA, the state PTA has recently made changes, which is fantastic. They've updated their report and their checklist, and I wanted to sort of showcase, and I put little asterisks next to all the changes so that those people that are familiar with these forms will see, oh, there are quite a few changes that have been made. That was all it was. Okay. So usually what I do is I like to do the audit report first. So as we dive in, I like to do the audit report, then the checklist, and then we'll take a look for items that are listed on the keep an eye out for list. And then we prepare our findings and recommendations. And then we complete the audit. So anytime you go through the audit and if something feels overwhelming, you're thinking, when am I going to get done with it? Just come back to here. It's you have a report, a checklist, you look at a list, you prepare and write up what you found and the recommendations, and you complete it. So this is essentially the way that it works. Some people like to do the checklist before the audit report. The audit report is all the finances. So I like to know that the money's there, and it's also much quicker and faster to use and to prepare. The audit checklist is a much longer checklist, but they check for procedures. So whether you check the procedures first and then you fill out the audit report or vice versa, when you go through the audits, you'll get familiar with what you like to look at first. So you can pick and choose which of those first three you do first. But that's the way I like it. You guys will enjoy it the way that works best for you. Okay, so the audit report, we're going to go in my order. So the audit report, they do need to be continuous and go from one audit to the next. So for each bank account, it needs to have a separate audit report. So if there's a checking account and a savings account, you need to have two separate audit reports. So on the audit report, you complete the top portion. I will be going over 2 slides on just the audit report, even though the audit checklist is longer, because the audit report tends to generate sometimes more questions in terms of while someone is performing it. It sounds easier here, and it should be easy, but it does come down to having good reports that you're pulling those numbers off of so that everything lines up and everything adds up well. So you complete the top portion, which essentially shows you the general information for the PTA that you can find on the front page of the PTA bylaws. So the PTA bylaws will be with the secretary's records. Sometimes a copy will be with the treasurer's records, but you will have a copy of the bylaws. And on the front page, it will have most of the information that you'll need to complete that top portion, as well as the bank, taking a look at the most recent bank statement. You'll pull the information from there too. It will list the fiscal year on the very top right. And that is a PTA fiscal year of the year that you're auditing. So whether it is the second half of the year or the first half of the year, it's still the PTA fiscal year. So the fiscal year always starts on July 1st and it ends on June 30th. So this PTA fiscal year is the 2019-2020 year, but you could just write 2019. So whatever the year is that you begin the PTA year, that's the tax year, and that's the fiscal year. So those 2019 taxes will be due to be submitted by November 15th of this coming up November. So you can either write 2019-2020 or just 2019. Dates covered by the audit, it should begin right after the last audit report. So to make things easier, let's just say, since we are now in June, that this training is going to go towards the year-end audit report. And we are going to assume that the PTAs have already completed a mid-year audit for the dates that I'll be using here on out. So the dates covered by this audit would be January 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. And the prior audit report ends through December 31st, 2019. Check numbers reviewed in this audit. So the first check number listed on the audit report needs to come right after the last check that's listed on the last audit report. So one report goes directly into the next audit report. There should not be any gaps. You should have information to be able to continue it from that next step on. Then the balance on hand. So then there's 2 sections on the PTA audit report form. The first part is the PTA records and their finances. Then the second part is the bank's numbers. And then we adjust the bank's numbers based on information the bank doesn't know. And then that adjusted number should be matching our PTA record numbers. So the first part is you take the balance on hand at the time of the last audit. So that would be the balance on hand as of 12/31/2019. You get the figure from the last audit report. And then you're going to be adding the receipts from January through June 30th, and then subtracting the disbursements, meaning the expenses. And then the balance on hand is going to be June 30th, 2020. So that top section goes from the beginning of the period to the end of the period. So January through June. Then, and you're going to get those numbers to pull the receipts and disbursements from the treasurer's reports. So optimally, you have a treasurer who does great treasurer's reports, and all the numbers are great. They start and they end in the same numbers that you come up with. So their numbers on their reports should be good to use as those to put on the audit report. So if the treasurer's reports sometimes, and maybe I've had experiences where the treasurer's reports might be missing information, or I may not have a month that was generated because they just never did one. And so, of course, that's incomplete, and you're not going to come up with a good number unless you have complete treasurer's reports. And so if the treasurer's reports are missing any information, and next place to take a look is the treasurer's ledger, which should mirror the checkbook and the deposit records. Okay, so you calculate the balance on hand. So that's the top part of that one. Then we go into the next section, which is the bank numbers. So the bank numbers, you've got the last bank statement balance. So the last bank statement balance is
Hi, I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. I think you muted yourself.
Can everybody hear me now? Or Barbara, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. So I am not muted. I see that. Okay. Thank you. And I apologize if I got muted. Okay. So, as I said, you'll get this presentation. So I hope if I was muted that you are able to hear the last bit that I had said. Okay, moving on. So the next section on the audit report is the bank reconciliation section. So the last bank statement balance that you're going to list is the ending balance for the audit period. So since we're doing a year-end audit, that will be June 30th, 2020, and you pull the bank statement balance that the bank shows on that last bank statement. Then you want to add in any deposits that have not yet been credited to the account. So since this is the bank section, they aren't aware of any monies that the PTA has gotten received. So let's just say school ends on June 4th, and then PTA gets a check from a Ralph's community contribution for $100. And they need to deposit that check, which should be done in a timely manner. But let's just say they put it someplace and they totally forgot that they had the receipt, that they had the check, and they didn't deposit it by June 30th. So you really want to make sure all deposits are any receipts that are in hand, if they weren't done timely, that they did not cross over an audit period. So they all need to be deposited with nothing outstanding on December 31st and on June 30th. So let's just say, oops, an accident happened. It's July 1st. Oh no, I found it. It was in an envelope and I totally forgot to deposit it. That would be a deposit not yet credited, meaning that it's funds that the PTA has that your books show that you've received it because the treasurer typed it in that they received the money, they have the money, but they just physically forgot to deposit it. So that's an amount that the bank is not going to be aware of. So Usually this section for deposit is not yet credited is always usually 0. It's usually very rare that something like that happens, but just in case things aren't adding up and they show more receipts than you do, you can always usually figure out, oh, I see that they didn't deposit that. They show that they have more money than the bank does at the end of that period. Usually it's 0. So that's usually not even an issue. Then you go to the uncleared checks. So these are the checks that the PTA has written that have not been deposited by the recipients. So you wrote checks, the PTA wrote checks out to companies, reimbursements to people, and they didn't cash their checks by June 30th because you don't have to cash a check right away. But so those are the outstanding checks that are uncleared. So the bank is not aware that you wrote those checks because they haven't seen them yet. So that's where you want to list all the checks that have not cleared through the bank. It's also a good idea if you see that there are some bank checks that haven't cleared and they're more than 3, 4, 5, 6 months old, that you notate that they are old checks and that someone should look into them to try to either put a stop payment on the check and reissue it, or if it's a check that got lost and you can't find the person, put a stop payment on the check and just reverse the check amount out of the PTA books. So that's where you put all the outstanding checks, and then you calculate the balance. So essentially you're doing a bank reconciliation. So the bank statement balance on June 30th, you're adding in those deposits they don't know about, you're taking out from their balance the checks that you've written that they haven't seen yet. And then that total figure is going to be the reconciled bank balance. And that has a little asterisk next to it. And I'm sorry, I can't have the audit checklist and the audit report forms here to be able to show you and point you to the areas. But you'll see on those forms, there are 2 areas that have asterisks and they need to match. So the PTA book balance for June 30th needs to match the bank balance that has been adjusted at 6/30/2020 also. So if they are off, then you need to figure out why they're off. I have found for myself, it's one of 2 things. It's either that I miscalculated and I just go through and I recalculate it. The other one is going back to those receipts and disbursements, because you're taking 6 months of information. And if they didn't do a mid-year report, then you're taking 12 months of receipts and 12 months of disbursements, and you're just sort of like adding up those monthly totals, but still something could be off very easily in something like that that wasn't prepared well, let's just say by the treasurer, possibly. So go back and take a look at those 2 areas. And then hopefully everything works out well. And at that point, there are 2 areas of the audit report you cannot finish yet. One is where it talks about membership. The state PTA added new membership lines. And since you haven't taken a look into membership yet, you can't complete that. And then the bottom of the form is where you're going to complete the audit, where you say that the procedures and the numbers were either correct or need improvement. And that's where it gets signed, the audit's completed. So we will come back to that. So at this point, you know the money's there, you don't have any issues with it, you move on to the checklist. So the checklist is the other form that we need to prepare when doing the audit. And there is a small top section, and the small top section is about the financial records, essentially checkboxing whether or not you have those items. And I have in my very detailed training materials, and you will see how detailed they are when you get them. But I want to make sure that anyone who has almost never even seen PTA books can know where to find stuff. So I meant them to be very helpful for almost everybody. So that top section of this checklist lists a bunch of different records and documents, and my detailed notes do provide a description as to what they are and where to find them. And they also list the federal and state documents that the government requires, but the checklist does not include them all. So I don't know if PTAs are still doing raffles, but if you hold a raffle and you get a raffle, you have to file for a raffle application, and then you have to conclude with a raffle report. Those required government forms are not listed on the checklist, but they are listed on the state and federal forms that are in my training materials to look out for. Something that's new that the state PTA added for the federal forms that are required are those PTAs that have gross receipts of $50,000 annually or under. So those who are doing the tax postcards, those people, those units now have an additional form that they will have to complete starting for the 2019 tax year. So they will start doing that when they submit their taxes by November 15th for this coming up year. It's not for the taxes that you now have an extension for if you didn't file taxes last year, because that's for the 2018 year. So this is only moving forward to the next time that need to be done. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's on there. Okay, so the audit checklist has it goes down through all these procedures and areas to check. So then to the right of this form, sorry you don't have this form with you, and I don't know how to incorporate the form into a presentation, but I will learn how to do that for next time. So on the right-hand side of the checklist, it has a column for checking yes, a column for checking no, and a column for checking not applicable. So for each area, each area that you're reviewing, you'll check box one of those, and then all those that you have no's for, you will need to include those in your findings reports and then recommendations to improve those procedures. So I'm not going to go through the whole checklist because it's just too detailed, and no one wants to go through all those details. And since I have those on my notes, I'm just focusing on some areas that I think are best to bring up. And I usually get the most reactions and most questions from the PTAs during training on these. So Barbara, you are welcome to, well, first of all, why don't I stop right now? Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, I'm talking so much. Okay.
Out on the chat box right now. So if you want to keep going on, I'll let you know if somebody.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So there's a section towards the beginning of the checklist after you're checking those records that says beginning balance records. It says the beginning balance, the ending balance of the bank reconciliation, which would be for December 31st, and the last audit report from December 31st needs to be compared to the beginning balances on the checkbook register, treasurer's ledger, and the treasurer's reports. Okay, so what the treasurer does is the treasurer writes all their financial activity in a ledger. All the monies that come in and go out are on the ledger. Any changes to those along the way, the bank found that we deposited the wrong amount, any corrections, all that goes into the ledger. The checkbook register, and of course, this can all be done in a financial management system. If the PTA unit uses PTA Easy, or if they use QuickBooks or something similar, another online financial management system, they usually just have to type it in once and they can run a ledger report easily. They don't have to prepare a separate one. But if the treasurer is doing all this manually or into a spreadsheet on their computer or handwriting or handwritten someplace, they need to write out all the financial activity. So the ledger has a beginning balance and then all the money that comes in, all the money that comes out, and that should have balances for every month. The checkbook register some PTAs are not realizing they need to have a checkbook register completed. So what I mean by a checkbook register, it could be either something like the old-fashioned checkbooks where we used to have those small little registers that you would flip up and it has a beginning balance and you write when you write a check. They can use one of those, but usually the check stubs that are just to the side of the checks or whatever they have that they record the checks that they're writing. All the other financial activity needs to be incorporated into there too. So it's not just the checks that were written. So all the deposits, all the electronic debits and credits that come in through the bank also need to be incorporated into those checkbook stubs. And balances need to be written and underlined at every month along the way. A third set is the treasurer's report. So they will take those figures and they will prepare the treasurer's report. So if someone is generating this all by hand, and the checkbook is generated by hand I don't know if many PTAs can even generate a check other than just manually writing a check anyway. But those are three identical sets of financial records. So they're entering information into the ledger. They're entering all the banking information into the checkbook register. They're entering all the information into the treasurer's report because that's what they need to show their executive board and the association. They need to report all that financial information. So that's why the treasurers have a big to-do list, is because they have three identical sets of financial records. And then on top of that, they are required now to, which they should have been before, performing a monthly bank reconciliation, but they need to take a look at the bank statements, even if they were doing them before, but they need to perform a bank reconciliation for each month. And that ending balance adjust when they reconcile that bank balance to reflect the monies that the bank doesn't know about and the checks that the bank doesn't know about that have been written that haven't cleared the bank. Once that adjusted monthly bank statement figure, that gets compared to what's on the treasurer's report, and that gives the treasurer the clarity and confirmation that their number on the treasurer's report is correct. So there's a lot of duplication. So quite frequently, I hear from a lot of PTAs, and I have seen that the ledger is missing. So it just needs to be written up that the treasurer needs to prepare a ledger for each month. If they're using PTAEZ or QuickBooks, all they have to do is print out financial activity. They can even do it month by month, and then they can insert the beginning and ending balances, but something that can show the balances there. But that's really easy to generate off of a financial management system. Okay, so bank statements need to be, if you are physically receiving them from your bank, you receive them monthly. They need to be opened up or received by a non-check signer, meaning the treasurer shouldn't be getting them from the location that they're mailed to. That a non-check signer should be picking them up, opening them up, reviewing them to sort of take a little look to make sure that nothing looks off in any way, and to just glance and take a look at the figures that are coming in and out of the bank. And then they need to sign and date that they've reviewed it. And then they can give it to the treasurer. The bank reconciliations are those that are prepared by the treasurer. It is a new requirement by our insurance company that those bank reconciliations are now being reviewed, signed, and dated monthly by a non-check signer. So it doesn't have to be the same non-check signer. How you find out if someone is a non-check signer is take a look in the unit's bylaws. The bylaws show who is authorized to be a check signer. And sometimes when you look at it, and I've only seen this once, but I've come across and I've audited a lot of books, so you probably will never see it, but I have seen where somebody was signing checks that was not a designated check signing person by the bylaws. So they really couldn't be signing checks. So I can guarantee you probably won't ever see that, but you need to take a look at the bylaws anyway to make sure that the person who is signing those bank statements and the person who's checking those bank reconciliations and reviewing them and signing them are not check signers or authorized to be check signers. So even if they're authorized, I would say they shouldn't be doing it, even if they're only, let's just say the bylaws are allowing 3 positions to be check signers. It's usually the president, the treasurer, and some of them will list a third person, a third position. Let's just say VP of membership. No, VP of Ways and Means, let's just say. So if that is what the bylaws say, and the VP of Ways and Means never signs a check, but the VP of Ways and Means is signing these, even if he or she is not physically ever signing a check, and the bank doesn't allow them to sign checks because you have to have the bank sort of verify that that these people are added onto the bank account who are authorized to sign checks. It would be good to mention that it's probably not a good idea for them to do it because they could be a check signer if they wanted to, if they provided the documents to the bank with the PTA. So just make sure that person's not a check signer. Okay. Next part. So the next section that I like to bring up is membership. So I like to always ask for a membership report. And I can't tell you during the trainings or even the school PTAs that I audit for will look at me like, well, what do you mean? Okay, so every PTA has someone who's in charge of their membership. So whether it's a membership chair or you actually have a VP of membership, somebody is handling membership. That person should know how many members they have in the PTA because they're working with membership. Even if the treasurer is handling all the financial information about membership, the person who says we have 300 members or 305 members, the treasurer should also say, yeah, we have 305 members. I have proof of that too. So even if at the time when a membership form is received, that membership check goes to the treasurer and the form goes to the membership chair, they need to be on the same page. So they should have the exact same number. So whoever's in charge of membership should, in my opinion, prepare a membership report, or at least where as of December 31st and as of June 30th, we have this many members. And you can confirm that by reviewing the financial records with the books that you have during the audit. But to make things easier, you should have the PTA telling you, this is how many members we have. You should not have to calculate it. You should be verifying it, but you shouldn't have to calculate. They should be providing you with more membership number information. Also, with your audit materials, they should be giving you a current list of PTA members. So technically, at every single PTA association meeting, they should have an updated membership list. Often it's not used and often it's not created because that's a lot of paper, but hopefully someone has it on a computer. If there's ever a vote that needs to be, or that is contested and you have to have paper ballots to keep it more secretive, you can only have members vote, and members who have been members for, I believe, 30 days. And you will have that information on a current membership list. As I said, that doesn't probably happen in most PTAs, but a membership list should be available for the executive board to use at every single association meeting. Okay, that also hopefully has a total so that you can verify also that, oh, it shows, 305 members. Then because, excuse me, we are also offering Totem to be able to collect memberships online. You should be receiving an online statement that is printed out by the unit, and you will verify and take a look at the Totem memberships that come in through the bank statements to verify that both sets of records match. So let's just say, for argument's sake, total membership dues are $10 for a unit, and $6 need to be sent up through the channels and remitted up through council, and they go up through all the way up to national PTA and get divided along the way. So $6 of every $10 membership dues does not belong to the PTA unit. And so they get to keep $4 for every membership. So in the bank statements, you will see an electronic credit to the account for that $4. It is the netted amount. You will not see $10 come in on those totem memberships. So the amount that does not belong to the unit is collected and is not put into the PTA bank account because it does not, that portion does not belong to the PTA unit. So you will count up those members by those $4 or those quantities of $4 that you see, which you can compare with the online statement as to how many totem memberships were generated for that audit period. And then essentially it tells you to look in the bylaws to find out how much the bylaws do or how much the membership dues should be. And that is the amount that they should be charging. So if if the membership dues are $10 and the bylaws show that the membership dues are still at $8 and they have not been updated or they have not been updated since then, they technically should not be allowed to charge any more than the amount that's in the bylaws. So that being said, I know that District PTA has been really, really great in the last year or two, connecting with all of our units to make sure that their bylaws are all updated, because I know that the amount that has to be remitted up through the PTA channels has increased more than $6, and some PTAs were going negative in not being able to keep anything per each membership for their own to be able to use to provide those great services to their schools. So you want to take a look and make sure that all the memberships they received, the portion that does not belong to them has been remitted to the council treasurer so that the council treasurer can send them up through the channels. So if they received 30 members, so let's just say at the end of December 31st, they had 250 memberships, and now they have, they say they have a total of 305. They should have 55 memberships showing receipts for, and then also they should have 55 members times the amount, let's just say $6 still, times $6 that has been already sent up to the council treasurer. So if they have remitted all of them, but there's still 3 that they got towards the end of the PTA year, you need to list that they need to send those last PTA memberships up to the council treasurer. Okay, minutes. Minutes need quorum. I know, I'm sure you guys have heard in your meetings, we need to meet quorum. Though your bylaws say that for any voting to count, you need to meet or exceed quorum, meaning the number of members that you have at your meeting has to minimally be met by that number. There's a different quorum number for your executive board meetings and a different one for your association meetings. And so the checklist does not ask for you to check quorum, but they ask for you to verify that that income and expenditures are spent according to the association wishes, and that the association released funds to spend those monies. And everything that they talk about in that section for minutes, nothing can be authorized by the association or voted out unless quorum is met. So if quorum is not met, and you find that out by, let's just say for an association meeting, you need 12 members. You take a look at the sign-in sheets that are in the secretary's records, because you have all the secretary's records for that association meeting. And if you have like 20 people who have signed up, then quorum has been met, and everything listed in their meeting minutes that was voted on is great. And it was it's quorum was met. So if they only had, let's just say, 6 people who sign in for that meeting and they voted to spend money in any amounts, that technically was not a valid vote because they did not have quorum met to be able to hold that vote. So I usually, as an auditor, just take a look at the quorum numbers. I just write them on a little sticky. And as I'm going through the secretary's records and I'm just reading the minutes to see what they're doing, because it will ask you to make sure that all the monies they spent were according to the association's wishes. So you'll see that in those minutes. And as I'm looking along, the secretary's records will usually have sign-in sheets. So I take a look at those to make sure that that 12 people is being met for each of the association meetings. And then I go and I do the same thing for the executive board meetings, which the number might be as low like as 5 or 7 executive board members. Okay, so that's what you look for and pay attention for in the minutes. If there are no sign-in sheets, the secretary doesn't need to have sign-in sheets. The secretary can type in or write in the minutes the names of all the members that attended and all the people that attended the meeting. So they will have to either list it within the minutes by name, or they can have a sign-in sheet that is attached to those minutes. So you'll see one or the other, or else if they don't have one or the other, then you just write that up. They need to show that they met quorum. That's all you have to write. Financial secretary and treasurer's reports. Okay, the financial secretary has his or her own job. So if you have a financial secretary, the financial secretary is in charge of all the receipts and all the deposits for the PTA. And the treasurer is responsible for making sure that the bank statements match what the financial secretary shows as monies that have come in and monies that have been deposited. And the treasurer's reports will show the expenditures. Most of our PTAs, at least a lot of the ones I've seen, do not or no longer have financial secretaries as a position. So the treasurers are doing the job of both. So your typical treasurer is collecting the funds, verifying the funds, depositing the funds, and writing the checks and recording all the activity and putting all that on the treasurer's report. So for simplicity's sake, we're just going to focus on that it's only a treasurer and it's the treasurer's reports. So all the financial activity for the audit period needs to be listed on the treasurer's reports. When you are looking at the treasurer's reports, you need to make sure that you're looking at the treasurer's reports that are in the secretary's files. And I say that because the treasurer is usually, I would say 90% of the treasurers are not handwriting out the treasurer's reports anymore. They're generating them on a computer. They're printing them from a financial management system. It is very easy to make changes. And quite frequently, there are so many details with at least our elementary and really, really busy PTAs that it's often, sometimes something gets missed and the treasurer's like, yeah, I missed that. And they go back and they're easily able to type in a correction. But so you want to be taking a look at the treasurer's reports that were presented to the association. And at those meetings, a copy of the original signed treasurer's report should be given to the secretary, and the secretary keeps those in his or her books. So when you're looking at treasurer's reports for any of your balances, for any of the figures, you want to take a look at the ones that the association has seen or that the executive board office has seen. So you want to look at ones that the secretary has proven that has been reviewed. I would look at the ones from the association meetings. Okay, so you compare the contents of those reports with the treasurer's ledger and checkbook register. They should all mirror each other. And then at the mid-year audit, okay, well, let's start with the year-end audit because that's what we're focusing more on for right now. So at our year-end audit, after June 30th, when the treasurer has enough time to wrap up reports, they need to generate a June 30th treasurer's report to make sure that all the treasurer's reports are reflective for each month for 2020 through June 30th. even if the last PTA meeting was, let's just say March because of COVID-19. And even if the pandemic wasn't around, a lot of PTAs don't have meetings after May. Sometimes they end in April. Some will have a June one, but they don't do it on June 30th. So there's always a treasurer's report that goes through June 30th, or at least from the last treasurer's report. Some treasurers will do it meeting to meeting. So at the last PTA meeting on a normal year, let's just say it was June 2nd, they still need to prepare a report from June 2nd through June 30th and have that balance there to end up that PTA year. Okay, so for the mid-year audit, we're talking about from January through the end of December. Oh, sorry, let me go back to the year-end audit, sorry. What I was getting to is that after they prepare the final treasurer's report, they also need to complete an annual financial report. That's a standard form that there's a format on California State PTA. It's an annual report that is done every single year that recaps all the finances and all the monies that were collected and spent. And they have to prepare that before they give the books to the auditor. So for the year-end audit, so when you receive the books, let's just say in July, beginning of August, you'll check that that annual financial report was prepared and that the beginning balance on the report, which should be for July 1st, was the balance that is a correct balance for July 1st. So you either look at the additional or previous additional audit report, or you can take a look at the reconciled bank balance to make sure that they started out with a good number and that the June 30th number is a number that you've come up with your audit reports, as well as going through the audit, that is the correct ending number. So if you were doing a mid-year audit, you want to check the prior year's annual financial report to make sure that it was presented to and approved by the association and that the ending balance matched the audit balance as of the end. Okay, so to make this a little bit easier, we do the year-end audit and we've checked to make sure the annual financial report has a year-end figure and it's great. Fast forward 8 months from that point, we're now doing the mid-year audit for July 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. And we're now like all the way in February. And so we want to check to make sure that the annual financial report that was prepared in July had those good balances and that ending balance matched what the auditor had said on June 30th was the correct audit balance. And that it was presented to the association because the association needs to approve that. That's usually something that the council treasurers follow up on. It's like with the budget, they also make sure that they get a copy of the PTA's budget as well, just like tax returns and things. Okay, so on the treasurer's report, one thing that a lot of PTAs do not do, actually a lot do them, but some do not, is that within the treasurer's report, the funds not belonging to the unit need to be separated out onto the report. So I wish I could show you what a sample of a treasurer's report looks like, but the top section will have all the receipts that have come in to the PTA during, let's just say they're doing a monthly report. So let's just say for January, they have all the receipts for January at the top of the report. They start off with the beginning balance, and then they add those receipts. And then there's a section right underneath it that are essentially receipts not belonging to the unit. So any membership monies that were received, only that $4 per each membership dues that was collected is up at the top section as the receipt, because that's what belongs to the unit. And that $6 for every membership is what is in the section called funds not belonging to the unit or receipts not belonging to the unit. It's a receipt, but it's a receipt that the government requires that we do not overinflate our income or receipts by monies that do not belong to our organization, meaning they don't belong to our PTA unit. So they do belong to our council, our district. Our council takes a little portion, district takes a little portion, the state takes a little portion, and the national PTA takes the rest. So those are monies that are not belonging to our organization. We cannot include them in our numbers. So every treasurer's report needs to have that broken out. Another thing that would be a receipt would be founder's free will offering. If there's a collection near Founders Day in the spring, those are also not belonging to the unit, so they need to be there. So anything that is collected that doesn't belong, it doesn't mean that it doesn't get paid someplace else. So we all know that we all pay for our PTA insurance. We pay, so with, let's just say PTA insurance, we need to pay them, but that is not funds not belong to the unit. We're using our own PTA funds to pay our insurance, but that portion of the PTA membership dues is not from our PTA and cannot be listed into that section of receipts without it being broken out into the funds not belonging to the unit. So then the next part, so you've got a beginning balance, all the receipts not belonging to the unit, then that gets added together. And then you subtract out the expenditures. That's the next part on the treasurer's report. And then for those memberships that you received, that $6 per membership you received also goes in the disbursement area if it was paid. So anytime that we remit those funds to the council treasurer, and let's just say for the perfect scenario, we received, let's just say, 2 memberships in the month of January. So, and we're going by what we were using before. It's a $10 membership. $4 is what the PTA unit keeps. $6 is what we remit up and provide to the PTA council because it doesn't belong to our unit, and then it gets up the channels. So 2 memberships come in. At the very top, the receipts for memberships is $8 because it's 2 times 4. Then the funds not belonging to the unit is that $6 per membership. So it's going to say $12. So $12 in receipts do not belong to the unit. So the $12 and the $8 is $20. So if a PTA was putting the whole $10 there, it would show the same $20. We're just breaking it out because the government requires that we break it out. And it's important that it's showing that to the association because not all people coming to our meetings know that we only get to keep a very small portion of our member dues. Then the expenditures, we have the same thing, funds not belong to the unit. Let's just say that in a very timely way, we turn those funds over that don't belong to us. So we should have that, and we cut out a check to the council PTA for those $12. So $12 should be listed as funds not belong to the unit on that section too. If nothing was remitted to council, it would just show 0, but the line item should still be there anyway. I think technically it probably doesn't have to, it can, but I think it's great just to keep it there and just have it being 0. But okay. Reporting forms and tax returns. And I know it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. We will be wrapping up the rest of this a lot quicker. So I thank you very much for your patience. Reporting forms and tax returns. I provide all the details for you to review very quickly. You want to make sure tax returns were submitted. So in a mid-year audit, you would look for them to be submitted, or you would look for an extension filed so that they could file it in the second half of the year. During this year-end audit, we want to make sure that the tax returns were filed in the fall. So you usually will see a check, or not a check, but you will see copies of the tax returns in the records. If you don't see them and you see an extension, you want to ask them if they filed their return. Right now, because of the pandemic, they have an extension on top of the extension. So I believe it's July 30th. So it's past the PTA year that, that the tax returns can be filed for the 2018 year. So whichever period you're auditing, you should be looking for tax returns to make sure that if they were extended, that they were filed. And then just because it's hard to know where to put this next part, if you suspect mismanagement of funds, that is, you're seeing that there are monies that they say they received and you can't see them anywhere deposited. They can't provide any paperwork as to where this money is. If things are not adding up, if their treasurer, you've heard they're having problems with the treasurer, or the treasurer left and nobody did an audit and nobody knows where that envelope of money went, you need to let the PTA president of the district know. So you want to contact Barbara immediately. You can ask some brief questions while you're just asking for, oh yeah, do you have copies of this, or do you have this? And if they're like, no, and no, and but you don't want to get too involved. You really want to just report it, because Barbara will be great. She will connect with the council. She'll connect with the PTA unit, and she'll try to figure it all out. And over in the district PTA, they are great. They will work with the PTA. They just want to make sure that things are being done and that the PTA keeps the money that the PTA raises. Okay, so so you want to, the next part, audit reports and audit recommendations. So we're heading towards the very end here. You want to check to make sure the audits are done semi-annually on the checklist. You check yes if they are, no if they're not. Because of the pandemic, a lot of the mid-year audits may not have gotten done for whatever reasons. It just got extended too late, and then the pandemic happened, and then it didn't happen. You could just write they were not done because of this reason. But any units that are consistently not doing semi-annual audits, hopefully the council treasurers are working with them to make sure that they're doing them. Okay, the next thing is you want to take a look at the items that are on the keep an eye out for list. So I went through the California State PTA website, and there are a lot of other things that are not listed on the PTA checklist. So, and there are procedures that are not listed on there that will protect your PTA and are designed to protect your PTA officers as well. And there are things that don't apply to some PTAs, and most of them may not apply to your PTA. But it's important to take a look at the list, because anything on there that your PTA is involved with, you need to make sure that they are aware that they need to comply with recommendations. You do not, as an auditor, need to understand everything about PTA. And I know all this is probably very overwhelming, especially to any of you who have not been in PTA a long time. I have the strong advantage of being in PTA many, many years, working primarily with and in the treasurer and auditing areas. So, and just participating in being in PTA throughout all the years with my kids in grade school gave me just too much knowledge. So that's why I like to share the knowledge with everybody else. So you don't have to understand everything about this, but the audit opens up that conversation, because you can anything you don't understand that is mentioned here, you can ask the treasurer or the other executive board members of the unit that you're auditing. And if they have no clue, you can show them what it is. And if they still have no clue, then that means they're probably not following a procedure. Okay, so some of the items on that keep an eye out for list. One is PTAs cannot have petty cash. There are ways to have cash available for sales at your events and activities, but it's not petty cash kept ongoing. There's other things like if PTA hires independent contractors, if the PTA gives gifts to the school of either money or items, that a fiduciary agreement should accompany every gift to the school, so that to ensure that the schools are spending the funds or using the materials that are gifted in the way that the association wanted them to and voted out to do. Other ones are using gift cards as thank yous or prizes. If PTAs use and have inventory, if they sell t-shirts or other items, they need to be having inventory records provided to the auditors, and they should be doing extra record keeping. All of these things on the keep an eye out for list all have links that you could just click on or you can refer to your PTA to click on it to have them make sure that they follow procedures, and it goes right into the California State PTA website. One other one that's listed is hospitality expenditures should not be exceeding 5% of the total PTA annual budget. So, and that includes staff appreciation, like if you're doing a big brunch or a big breakfast for the teachers or staff, the funds that are spent cannot exceed or should not be exceeding 5% of the PTA's total budget for those expenses. So there's more information on that. There's a bunch of other things too. And then we go to the last part that is still on that keep an eye out for, because it's just easier to put it in there, is about PTA insurance. So anything you see that you think needs to be brought to the attention of your PTA board for the keep an eye out for list, and for PTA insurance, you want to make sure that you put those notes in your findings and recommendations so that they can take a look at the list and work on it to improve their procedures. So PTA insurance, as I said before, is super, super important to make sure we are covered by our PTA insurance. Every board member of the PTA, and if you're an auditor, you should also be just as equally aware of and have been provided with the resource to find where the PTA insurance guide is. It's very easy. It's californiapta.org, so capta.org. You just type in the search engine insurance, you click on it, and it provides a whole big page, and it provides the information for the insurance guide, which can be downloaded in Spanish and in English, and it provides a wealth of information and resources. I listed here our insurance carrier. Our current insurance carrier is AIM Association Insurance Management. And I wrote down their phone number and or their email address, their website actually. That information is also on the last page of the insurance guide. So the unit needs to check all proposed PTA activities. So when they're planning activity in May and June or during the summer, they have to look at all their activities, fundraisers, programs, anything they're going to be spending their money on. If they are planning on putting money into paying for buses for field trips, helping to pay for programs and companies to come to the school for an educational assembly or something, all of those need to be checked against our insurance guide before any activity can be planned, because they have a little stoplight and it's a red light, yellow light, and green light list. Anything on the green light list, all those activities you can do unrestricted. If it's on a yellow list, if it's a yellow lighted activity, then they have conditions that must be met before the activity can occur, and it also requires that you contact the insurance company when you're planning the activity. Whether it's a phone call or an email, you have to let them know what you are planning on doing if it's a yellow lighted activity. A red light list, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the training, is a no-no. Those are activities that have no coverage with our insurance company, and anyone who might get hurt or there's any litigation or lawsuit that can come out of it, the insurance company will put their hands up and say, hey, we never allowed it. That's up to them. And those lawsuits can actually reach, if the PTA was negligent and somebody got injured, those or even if someone didn't get injured, if there was PTA negligence, the lawsuit could actually reach our PTA officers, and they could be listed personally liable. And I got to tell you, all those years in PTA, I don't want to, I do enough. I don't want to have anything relating to my family, my home, my car, my assets. I don't, hey, I was doing my best. I'm only a volunteer. And that's all. We are grateful for anybody who even thinks that way. So we do not want to put them in any danger. Our PTAs are alive because of our PTA executive board, because we can't have PTAs without those 3 minimum positions. We need them, and we need them to be protected, or else we don't have our PTAs to continue doing the wonderful things we do for our students, families, and schools. So we want to make sure that we check these guides, make sure that we're in compliance with our insurance company. So all Also, if the PTA provides or helps to provide an activity, event, or program, it must comply with the insurance definition of a sponsored event. You may not think about it if you are providing $100 to the fifth graders, if you're helping to pay for some activity that the fifth graders are doing at school as part of like their end of the year festivities, and you're helping to provide one part of their activities. That money connects you to that activity. So that activity needs to meet that it's a sponsored activity by the PTA. So it's best if the PTA pays for an entire something of something, or like an entire event or activity, because you will have to follow what they call a sponsored event, which for the most part says that if you're paying for it, it's, I don't know, it's listed in there, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me and I'm blanking, but it has to meet like 4 different criteria. So almost anything that a PTA does, make sure it's listed as a sponsored event. Also in the PTA insurance guide, they have pages on vendor requirements. If you are paying if you're paying a bus company directly, there are a lot of insurance requirements. It is so much easier to pay and provide the money to gift it to the school for them to pay. I know the school goes back and forth. They want the PTA to do it all because they think it's so much easier for us to do it. But it's the push and the pull where we don't want to endanger our PTAs, and they don't want to take on the liability either. So that's when they push things back to PTA, is when they don't want the liability, which we understand. They have deep pockets, but we also have pockets, and we also have people we need to protect. So please make sure that things like participation and volunteer liability waivers are signed. They have information on best practices and gifting items to the school. So there's a wealth of information in there. Everybody on the board should be very familiar with it. Anyone who's on a committee that is planning a program or fundraiser, minimally the chair needs to be very well versed with at least going through the insurance guide. So it doesn't extend to only the PTA officers. Those people who are chairing those events should also be aware of it. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, I promise. Okay, we will be done in less than an hour and a half, so I've got 10 more minutes. Okay, so you prepare your written report of findings and recommendations. As I said, you write down all the no's that you found and all the documents that they couldn't produce that you needed for the audit checklist. Put those on there. You go through the keep an eye out for list, any of those things that pop on up that they can't provide you enough information or any documentation to show that they're in compliance. You put that on there. And then you also go through, you don't have to go through the insurance with a fine-tuned comb, but minimally take a look at, okay, the easiest thing is to ask the treasurer or the president, please tell me what you did to comply with the insurance requirements on all of your activities, and put it on them. I've been in PTA so long, I just go through the list and I see if it's a green lighted list, whatever, it's fine. If it's a yellow lighted one, did they do this and that? So, but it is not up to you to have to take the extra time to do it. They should really have to prove to you that they have been taking the time to be in compliance. And if they have no idea what you're talking about, then that gets written down that they need to get very familiar with the insurance guide. Okay, so you put all those things onto the findings report. You provide recommendations for them all, but you don't want to be punitive. You want to be encouraging, because we're all volunteers. A lot of the people that you are auditing have some of the toughest and largest amount of work, and you want to you don't want to make it sound like you had a problem, you aren't doing this, you aren't doing that. This is not done. Please make sure it's done. This didn't have 2 signatures. Make sure each has 2 signatures, and you just be very factual about it. Also throw in something really nice if the records are in good order. They did a phenomenal job of taking minutes or whatever. Just putting some of those things in there help to balance it, because unfortunately the auditor is thought of as being a little bit of like the bad cop, but essentially we should be thought of as being the good cop and not even a cop. Oh, sorry. Even right now, even worse. I shouldn't be saying even cop, but we are taking that time to go through the books to make sure that our PTAs are on track. And that's our whole goal, is just to, let's keep everybody on track. Let's see what needs to be done. And the people, most of the time, the people in those positions are not even aware that they're not on track on some procedures, because there are just a lot of procedures and not everybody goes to training. And even if they go to training, they don't remember everything from training. And so it's just one of those things that and then over the years, you think you still know the same thing, and then PTA updates their procedures, and then you're not aware of it, and it's too much to be on top of it all. So it's just, everybody should just take a little bit of time every year to just review what their position is for and to do the best that they can. And it's not all on the treasurer. The PTA board is a unit. So if the treasurer is having a hard time completing and working through the procedures, then the board, we're a family. We need to help each other out. If somebody is having personal problems at home and are not able to prepare the reports they need to, or able to take the minutes that they need to, then, somebody needs to jump in and say, here, we're here to help you. We're here together, and we're here for each other. So it's not about, this is me and this is all I'm doing and it's everybody else's problem. It's, let's try to work together. Okay, so you got your findings, recommendations. You go to the audit report again and you fill in those membership figures, and at the very bottom you select whether the records, and unfortunately the state PTA did not change the audit report wording to what I would hope it would say, because at the very bottom of the audit report, what is read at the association meeting and at the executive board meeting when the audit report is presented, it says, I have examined the financial records, and it doesn't have to be the auditor who has to present it. Anybody else on the PTA board can present the audit report on behalf of the auditor, so you don't have to be available. But it writes, I have examined the financial records of the treasurer of PTA, PTSA. I don't like that wording, because it's essentially pointing to the treasurer, that anything wrong is the treasurer's fault. No, everything is the executive board's doing to improve procedures. It's not one person. Sure, the majority of the documents you're reviewing are from the treasurer, but you're also looking for quorum. That's not the treasurer's job to ensure quorum's done. It's like the president has a part in this, the secretary has a part in this, the treasurer has a part in this, the VP of Ways and Means has a big part of this for insurance requirements. Anyone who's in charge of programs, like almost everybody except for like the historian and even parliamentarians sometimes, are like, everybody has a big part in this audit. So I usually cross off financial and I cross out treasurer, and I just say, I have examined the records of this PTA. So that's what I do, because I don't feel comfortable saying and pointing to the treasurer, because I review more than just the treasurer's books. And then you say whether they're substantially correct with the attached recommendations and findings, or you choose one of the others. And my instructions, my step-by-step instructions give you a little bit of a help to be able to decide which one to select, whether it's correct or partially correct or substantially correct. So I usually say substantially correct with the attached recommendations and findings. I do not attach the recommendations and findings, because they are not privy to the association as a whole. Those recommendations and findings are for the PTA executive board to work off of as internal notes. But having said that, the recommendations and findings should be made available to your PTA members upon request to be viewed. Don't start, because first of all, anyone who is providing the recommendations and findings, anyone reading them is going to place blame on the treasurer, because it says treasurer right there, and that's not fair. And they're going to pick on somebody who they want to pick on, and that's also not fair. So those findings and recommendations, I say, have been provided to the executive board for them to improve on PTA procedures, because up here where the numbers match, the money is fine, and that's usually what our PTA membership is interested in, making sure that all the money that came in is still there and was spent the way that they wanted to have it spent. It's procedures. There's a lot of procedures. Most PTA members care less about the procedures, but they should not be getting a copy, whether it's 5 pages or half a page. So that's my take on it. So then you go to the very bottom of the report, you date when you completed it, you sign and print your name. Then your work will be reviewed by an audit committee. That's a new insurance requirement for this year. And this PTA year, they want an audit committee to review the auditor's work. And it needs to be at least 2 people, 2 or more people, and one of those can be the auditor. But if the audit report and the audit was completed by did I put it down here? No. Okay, if by a qualified accountant, so like a CPA, then an audit committee is not needed. To me though, a CPA and paying for somebody to audit the books, they're gonna audit the financials perfectly. They can do that. No matter if it's a nonprofit or not, they can calculate figures. They can make sure that everything there is perfectly correct, but they're not going to know about the procedures. So the procedural end of it, they won't know. However, the biggest thing is making sure that all the money is there and it was spent the way it was supposed to be spent. So most of us will have an audit committee reviewing our work. Then when they are done, there's a part now at the bottom of this form that the audit committee, people who are reviewing it, sign their names, and it's dated also. And then this report gets shown and presented to the executive board. They review it, they adopt it. Same thing happens at the association meetings. And then then it's up to the unit for them to send 2 copies of that adopted audit report to the council treasurer. So once you complete the audit report, you sign and date audit records. I'm not going to go over that because that's pretty self-explanatory there. You return the records to the unit. Before you return all the records, keep a copy of the audit report. And then you want to also keep your original audit checklist, because those are your own internal notes where you're making notes, yes, no, yes, no. You don't have to send it, but I think it is helpful for the PTAs to see the checklist, whether it's a blank one or if you want to share your notes, so that they're aware of all the different things that we're looking at when we're auditing the books. And then, of course, keep a copy of your findings and recommendations. And then I really recommend you send 1 copy of your audit report and findings recommendations report. Email that to the council treasurer, because when you are done with the report, let's just say you're done August 1st, you're done with the audit, you return the books, email it to the council treasurer, so the council treasurer knows the audit has been done, because the first meeting of next year may not be till September. Then the executive board, if they don't have a board meeting before September, you're talking about getting it being reviewed by the audit committee and then adopted by both of those 2. It may not even be done until October. So the council treasurer would at least know that it's done. They're just finishing up the adoption process of it. So that's my recommendations for that. Just the extras. Okay, so I went through that top part. If your PTA is generating financial records through like PTA EZ or another financial management system like QuickBooks, they should take a look to find out which records need to be printed out and bound together for physical storage. They can, I believe, also put them onto a disk or a flash drive, but there needs to be some permanence where it cannot be, where changes cannot be made at a later time. So it should have information in there for that. And then all records need to be kept for a certain length of time, and that's in the records retention and destruction policy, which is listed there. So we are exactly at 1.5 hours. Thank you for all those who are still here. Do we have any questions? And I totally understand if you just want to go and leave and have a drink. It's a lot. So I'm sorry it's a lot, and I really hope that you enjoyed some of the details, and I know you'll enjoy the training materials, and you can email me and ask me questions at any time. Yes, Barbara. Oh, I can't hear you. Hold on.
I don't see any questions out on the chat box. I will unmute everyone. So if they just want to kind of raise their
Okay.
hand and.
Is anyone still here? I see 2 people, but I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, I have people who are still here. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
It can be very overwhelming, and you guys
Yes.
hung tight through the whole thing. Thank you so much. We truly do appreciate your time. And please, if you have any questions, we will, the email will be posted. Actually, this entire training will be posted on the 31st District PTA website.
Ooh.
As well as the materials. So,
All right.
Karen, thank you. You take the most.
You're welcome.
And you make an amazing thing. Thank you.
Well,
we really do appreciate
I
it.
try. There's a lot of information, and this is the first time not speaking with people, being able to take lots of questions. We do usually run close to 2 hours or longer, so it's you guys got a deal, even though I'm sure it doesn't feel like it at all. Okay. Does
Karen,
anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's a lot of the material covered, and you know, I'm more of a visual person, so it's, you know, it's hard to kind of like walk through it and then not see examples. I mean, I'm a CPA, so I kind of understand reconciliation. Is it pretty straightforward? Like if I do the audit, that if I look at the previous year's reports and the checklist, like it pretty much walks me through everything?
Yes, my training materials go through everything step by step. So if you're not even familiar with PTA documents, yeah, you will. You'll have no problem. I mean, you can always sit down with the treasurer or whoever you're meeting with to get your docs and the records, and then have them show you where things are, and then you can always ask them questions along the way. So our PTAs are great with wanting to make sure the audits are done and any questions are answered.
What materials are you sending out? Because you did a lot of talking that was not on the slide. So is the training material more in depth? Like
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the presentation is nothing. I think my training materials are 12 pages long, but like the audit report has 2 pages of step-by-step instructions, and the checklist has, I think, 2 or 3. Finishing up the audit is another couple. There's a lot. It's I want to say when you take a look at it, it'll read probably more like a handbook than anything else. And nobody has to keep themselves muted now. I don't care about the noise, so you don't have to keep putting yourself on mute.
Yeah, I think that's just habit.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a good habit. Yeah, no, the training materials will be great. And I'm sorry, next time I will figure out how to incorporate those pages into my slides. So I did not check that out beforehand. As I said, I was just using my Zoom account, and I was able to record it and see it on my end, but maybe that's because I was the host. I don't know.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, no, and just to clarify, so the training material is going to be emailed out to us? We don't have to go somewhere and look for it?
Well, Barbara was just saying that they're going to be posted on the website, but on the district website, but you are planning on emailing the attendees?
For all the attendees that came to the training, you will get an email with all of the material attached to it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, with the instructions. Great. Yeah, thank you. Any others? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for giving us your time in your evening. We do appreciate it. And, you know, we're all learning how to do Zoom training on the job.